Hey everybody, welcome back to the HuMAN podcast. I am Joe Klemczewski with Jeff Stucke. We're going to talk about the intersection of clinical psychology and social psychology, social science, still in our series on the male perspective. We'll get to women at some point. Do they still matter? Are they relevant, Jeff? Are we going to ever talk about them?
Well, of course. I mean, absolutely.
I'm
Like,
kidding. Yeah, let's not shut down our
I know,
whole
I was like a deer in headlights. Like, what the
yeah.
fuck did you just say?
Uh,
Like,
Obviously a joke. But this one today on male inadequacy, I think the jokes will abound. Insert ego, testosterone, etc. But here's what I want to set up, and then I'll just see if even in the same ballpark as you. To say that males in particular have a problem with feelings of inadequacy inherently states that there is a lofty goal or image to which they contrast themselves. And if they don't feel like they're hitting that mark, then they're going to feel inadequate. And I don't necessarily hear, although it's obviously true that women struggle with the same things, we are tagged with that fragile male ego moniker. And so as a therapist who has worked with men for 25 plus years, and obviously they have relationships, spouses and so forth who are in the mix, where do you see male inadequacy line up? How much of a root cause is that impacting other areas of their lives?
I think it's interesting. The American Psychological Association did a survey on men. It's probably been maybe longer than I remember. Um, but one of the things, like we talked about last time, a significant source of the male identity rightfully comes from competence. The resilience to master difficult things. There is an overemphasis on goal achievement. And so, how much is enough? How much is good enough? Those kinds of things. And so subsequently, it's almost like being on a treadmill that's just constantly speeding up on you and starting to feel that pressure of, well, I achieved that goal. Now I have to achieve the next goal. And materialism drives a lot of that, right? I mean, and the next, get the bigger house, get the bigger car, get the, when do you, and some of that, the peacocking within men, is somewhat biological, but then it's fueled by that social norm of having the bigger, better thing. I'm not going to remember this guy's name. I'll look it up so that we can put it in the comments. But he referred to it as seduction equity. And particularly in males setting themselves apart, having that, the nicer car, the dressed better, the whatever that sort of thing. And so then that just kind of leads back to that treadmill that's constantly picking up speed. And either I just can't keep up anymore and I get kicked off the back of the treadmill, or I'm just daunted by the pressure of what's the next fucking goal that I'm going to have to achieve.
And
And male friendship is on the decline. Another thing that which I fully believe this, that male friendship is massively on the decline, and men supporting other men adequately emotionally, like that's a topic we can't even fucking talk about. It's like, whoa, bro, I don't need your emotional support. And it's like, no, that's wrong. Like men supporting other men emotionally. Um, what was the term that you used last week? Emotional
Emotional
generosity.
generosity.
Yeah, dude, that has resonated with me all week. I mean, I wrote that down. It was just something that I was contemplating, and um, men need to be emotionally generous with each other.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a conflict, but I went a little too far prodding and ribbing a friend and I offended him. And there is a power dynamic in this. And so I thought, man, I really need to reach out and repair this in some way. And so when we were alone, I took the time to say, hey, look, first of all, you really were correct in the situation, and we were having fun, and I could tell I really pissed you off. And I got pretty confessional. I said you were exactly right that even though I was being funny, it did start out in a way of just ribbing you because I thought you should do something another way. And I said you really got to the heart of something that I've probably struggled with longer than I want. And in the human psyche, we have an innate sense of the need for predictability and control. We lock the doors because we don't want somebody to come in and surprise us and murder us. We check our bank account because we don't want to overdraft something. We're constantly scanning the horizon for threats, psychologically, intellectually, etc. And I said, at that base root, besides all the jokes, I was just trying to say, man, I've got this all figured out. We should do it this way. I've already spent the emotional, intellectual energy to solve this problem. So just do it my way. And the content of this is neither here nor there, but you could tell the fact that I was offering a sincere apology and it was male to male bonding. It wasn't just let it roll off the duck's back, it's fine, we'll just forget it and bury it. But I addressed it and it really was a valuable repair. You could see, his mood elevate and we were kind of back on track. But what do you mean when you say male to male relationships, emotional support is on the decline? How would you suggest people solve that?
Um, it, First of all, I think that what that story that you just shared is a beautiful illustration of authentic vulnerability. For you going and just acknowledging the wrongdoing and wanting repair to be the outcome of that. I think a lot of times we talk about vulnerability and we as men, I think rightfully react to the fact that we think, well, we're going to have to just fucking start crying all the time. It's like, and I'm a crier. I mean, I don't mind a good cry, but it's like, I don't want to be fucking crying all the time.
I remember the first time you cried in front of me, and it was pretty impressive that you went there, and it was also startling. It scared me.
I wish I would have known that in real time that I had some power over Joe Klemczewski. Um, what was startling about it?
Well, first of all, we were in the squat rack.
Oh, okay.
And you're getting ready for a big lift, and we were talking about the passing of your mother, and it was pretty raw, and you were in a relationship that was a little fraught, and you were kind of comparing it. Here are these two women in your life, one, very important that you had just lost, and you just lost your shit, and you were very okay with that. Uh, and I mean, we got back to lifting, but it was, yeah, it was just like you were literally okay sharing that, and you trusted me to be there with you.
Yes, and it's something that I have to work at continually. But do. What was your original question? I sorry, I digressed on like.
How do we solve this? If
Oh,
we
okay,
need
yeah, yeah.
more male to male friendship and emotional support, what does that look like in today's world?
That's such a complicated issue. It's difficult for men. It's a difficult sell for men, honestly, because we're occupied at work. We have children that we want to participate in, and genuinely want most men, like you said, I've been working with men individually for over 25 years, and most men desire noble things, a healthy relationship with their spouse. They want to be an effective father. They want to be a provider. There's certainly been the guys that just are absolute toxic masculinity, to which I'm like, I can't help you. Get the fuck out. Um, but the vast majority of men want those things, but then subsequently they can feel that absence, but it's like making it a priority of I need to go like be a buddy, like hang out, be a dude, like that's a difficult thing. I've also found that women tend to want to create that space for men.
Hmm.
It's not, I haven't, I haven't worked with these people that are just like, like, fuck you, you're not going to go spend time with your friends. I've been with these goddamn kids. And, a lot of times these attitudes that have portrayed, I've just not experienced that.
Hmm.
It's, it's actually quite different than that. So, for men to understand, the two things that I always use, I was hugely influenced by Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Just it was like, what? Like, what? Why didn't we learn this in kindergarten? But the seventh habit of sharpening the saw. Like, when you keep the saw razor sharp, you're going to show up better as a husband. You're going to show up better as a father. This isn't, and the research is clear about this. Men spending time together is one of the most significant positive contributors to overall mental health, and it's making that a priority. Um, and then the question is, well, how the hell do you make a friend? It's like,
I seriously, I have had male friends in their social circles moving to different cities and so forth really, really struggle hard. And I mean, it's, trying to encourage them. You've got to go to meetup groups. I literally have felt like I'm teaching a kindergarten, student, like how to go up and meet a friend in the sandbox. But it is, I think, a very difficult thing today because we are a little bit more socially isolated in a physical sense.
yes. And as I work with clients, and my approach is I liken it to a dating relationship. If I see something attractive in another male, and it took me, I'm 15 years in this practice. This isn't something that because I had a lot of self-doubt and like insecurity. And then I was like, fuck it, man. I don't, if, if I could get something, and my approach is typically like, I've asked easily 20 guys to lunch or some version of that. Like, you really just seem like a guy that I should spend more time with. And e- most,
You literally did that with me 25 years ago.
right? So I've been doing this shit for 25 years.
That is
Um,
exactly how we met. You and I had an interaction. You followed up that week, and I believe that was your exact line. And you asked me to lunch.
oh,
And,
damn, I
and
need to
that,
update do I need to update, or is it gonna, I guess I'll
that's
stick with
still
it. If
your
it ain't
your
broke,
Tinder
don't fix it.
profile.
Yeah.
It was impressive to me. It really stuck with me. It was a statement of like this is really possible, and of course, it made me feel like somebody was interested, like I had value. We're speaking of inadequacy. That made me feel exactly the opposite. That here was
Yeah.
something that a potential friend was interested in and wanted to dig into a little bit deeper. That is really impressive.
And it is very, it's like when we were of dating age and learning to approach women, it was fucking terrifying. And there's some degree to which the dynamics are very, very similar. And I've been rejected. I've had guys that, I've left them a voicemail, sent them an email, whatever. They never responded. And yeah, it felt like asking somebody to dance and then them saying like, why the fuck would I dance with you? Um, but once I started to have some positive experiences with that, and it then the risk became worth it. And I made the decision that the only way that that was going to happen for me was I had to be insanely intentional about it. And so the framework of saying, I'm going, and also, Joe, that recognition that I need this. Like I need this when I have, I'm very fortunate to have a few because friendships, it's a lot, right?
Takes
I mean,
work.
I'm not talking about acquaintances. I'm talking about friendship. It's like you can't do a lot of that. There quickly becomes a point of diminishing return to where you start. Now, all of my relationships are suffering because I'm overcommitting myself to too many relationships. And I made that mistake too. It was kind of like, wow, this is great. So, and then it was like unintentionally became a shitty friend. And one of the beautiful things that was cultivated out of that was multiple people confronted me on that. And it's like, dude, you asked me if I wanted to be friends, and now, and it was like, oh shit, you're right. I, I've got to refocus. And it's, I maybe have, I mean, like have fucking more acquaintances than I could even, but in terms of like solid friendship, can talk about things that I need to talk about, but I don't, it's difficult to like, it's life
So
changing.
here's another thing you did well that I'm guessing you won't remember. Um, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago,
Okay.
we were having a lunch, and you let me know you were probably moving to Chicago. And you looked across the table and you said, Joe, our friendship is meaningful. I want it to continue. Will you help me do that? Will you shoulder some of that load? So, as you said, it's difficult to maintain a relationship, a friendship that's truly, deep enough to consider you're there for each other. And yet you recognize I can't do this by myself. Like, I'm gonna fail at times. So, Joe, I want you to know I do appreciate you, and I want to invite you in to bug me. Like you reach out to me, and I'll reach out to you. I think that was just because you probably had that background. Like you knew that potential liability was there, that things would just kind of go away, sight unseen.
Yes. And and I'll kind of close the loop on the solving of the problem. Uh highest what I feel like, Joe, is the highest priority of the recognition of how healthy male friendships affect us as men. I'm not talking about going to the strip club, and I'm not talking about shit like that. I'm talking about true friendship and just the familiarity of it, and the trust and connection that it cultivates, true vulnerability. The moment, you know, after my mom died, that was one part, my willingness to be vulnerable, but it was also one part your commitment to the friendship, knowing that this is a safe place to take that risk. And it's so it's that we as men have to recognize that. And I will tell you again, I'll reiterate, because I've before I started to really focus on working with men, I did infinitely more marriage therapy, still do a lot. And I see a true understanding of that from women, that yeah, and for them as well. And it friendship overall is in decline and it needs our attention. Um, and then so second to prioritization, then I would go back to strategy, some kind of a strategy. And that's where, in my mind, I just created kind of this dating concept. And it was like, well, if I saw an attractive woman, the only chance I have is to approach her. If I see something attractive in a man, then I'm going to approach, and I'm going to see what can be cultivated. And that's, it's one of those things, Joe, simple, not easy.
Right.
It's not very.
This strikes me unironically that in this discussion about male inadequacy, feelings of inadequacy, we started very internal, what's happening in our own brains. I wrote a review of a social science meta-analysis on feelings of inferiority, and the researchers categorized things into three groupings. The first was very internal, what makes me feel inadequate? I lack these skills, as you said, competency in a socially comparative way. I'm not good enough. It's that inner dialogue. The other two are external factors and demographics. So things like real friendships, things like your occupation, things like even your parents' socioeconomic status that may have imprinted you as a child. So there is almost this infinite web of pressures, internal and external, and just situational that can make us feel inadequate before we're even out of the gate. Like this is just what we feel because this is who we are in this space. And it dawned on me that you have to have a massive sense of intellectual self-awareness to know those are even factors, to know that these are the things pressuring me into feeling inadequate. And I just don't know that a lot of people do. We're sitting here on an evening where there was another school mass shooting this morning, and it was some, young male who just felt totally inadequate. Exactly what we're describing. I'm a victim. The world has wronged me in all of these ways, internal, external, demographic, and so I'm going to make everybody else suffer. So he shot up a school and then committed suicide. That is the extreme result of not resolving this. So how does somebody begin to even take those steps to understand this is what I'm feeling. This is what's inside. Maybe they don't even understand enough to call it inadequacy or inferiority. Where do you even start with somebody who just feels aimless and lost?
I'll go one step beyond that and say that I do think that current methodology in parenting strategies are fundamentally flawed. Um, Children are overparented and overprotected. They're well, you and I know this. It's like to be successful at anything, you have to have a palate for failure. And it's like whatever has made that so taboo in parenting of like the and I like my kids, but I don't fucking worship my kids. But it's like, that goddamn honor roll student fucking the bumper sticker. I like the one that says my kid beat up your honors. I mean,
I have not seen that. That's great.
oh, um, but a father who, any fathers that are listening, like even even when my kids were young, I would invite them into failure in the sense that if they were doing something stupid and it wasn't going to kill them, I just let them do it. And from something as innocuous as it's cold, but I don't want to wear my coat. All right, I don't give a fuck. I don't feel like parenting right now, and you're going to freeze your ass off. So that'll all work out. So exposure to natural consequences and empowering children that failure is a part of the process. We've got to somehow get that back into the ethos of parenting, because without that level of resilience, it becomes very, very difficult. And anybody else that's struggling with that right now, that might be, beyond that, you just got to do it. I wish I could make it quick and easy, but you just got to do it.
So let's say I'm a client in your chair and I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know why I'm so anxious, sad, depressed. I'm on SSRIs. I have suicidal ideation. I'm 23 years old. I can't get a job. I can't get a date. I'm inadequate. When you say, okay, you just have to do it, like therapeutically, would you give them some steps, some things to get them off the wall, so to speak, in the game?
Yes, and I typically do something absurd. Um, like I will have them. I've not been able to get. I've had. I actually have had several clients do this. I haven't tried it in Chicago, but I want you to get on a city bus and talk out loud to yourself and be overheard and have no regard for it. And be you're not going to know anybody on the bus, especially in Evansville because not that many people. And it's like, and then get off the bus and don't ruminate about it. It- Initiating conversation with people. Like I want 10 conversations this week. I want you, if you're at a grocery store, I want you to fucking talk to somebody. Say something to somebody. How's your day going? Just you've got when, anxiety and depression and those kinds of things in a non-pathological sense does become a product of self-absorption, right? Because it's like all you're doing is looking at you're myopic about the things that are making you inadequate or anxious or those kinds of things. And it's like you got to go do some hard things. And that that's and I negotiate with them, but it's like, okay, you did something hard. Okay. The person didn't acknowledge you. Are you dead? Like and it's starting to, how anxiety just hyper amplifies. So my fears just become so big, and it's finding ways to start conquering some of those fears. That's my primary focus is we've got to get going on some hard, scary things.
It reminds me how good therapy is very active like that. I have had the opportunity to work with, I think maybe three, like true clinical relationships with therapists, and you were the one with the homework all the time. Go do this. And at one time, you made fun of me because, of course, that's where I thrive. Like, just give Joe, get Joe to chase a bone, and he's going to come back with a fucking dinosaur. Um,
Yeah,
so maybe
I
that
didn't
wasn't
mean
as
for you to
helpful.
turn it in a plastic folder.
Yeah, here's my thesis report. I want to connect a couple things you said because I think they're incredibly relevant. Number one, you brought up the word absurd, and I was going to wrap up some of my thoughts with absurdism, which is an Albert Camus, you know, 20th century philosopher. I think incredibly breakthrough theory that we should all at least be aware of and do some investigation of. But you know, when we're talking about the action of feeling less inadequate and tying it back to competence, I do believe you're right. It has to do with at least just the action and getting over the fear of it. But we can also run the risk of tying it back to a scorecard. What if I don't accomplish this? What if I'm socially comparative, still in the bottom ranking? I'm not getting the dates, I'm not getting the promotion. Is there a sense where you just help people to accept this? This is life. You're not going to win them all. But we still have to move forward. Give me a general philosophy of how you live without always being just on your knees in the fear of inadequacy.
Certainly understanding that outcomes are beyond my control. I can do the right thing and it still not work. And that's just fucking reality. And it's like that sucks. But I can do the right thing and it's still not work. But I can always glean something from the experience. And that's really where I hone in is okay, what did you learn from that? And these things are somewhat cliche, but it's like, I was a big Harley guy, and it's like, it's the journey, not the destination. And and I think in your life, as you and I've talked about your experiences, it is your journey and your reflection upon your journey that's what's been the catapult to growth. It's it's it is that exercise. It's not, if you talk to the girl, you have no control over how she's going to respond to you. You just fucking don't. I don't know if she's sweet, or I don't know if she's the biggest bitch on two legs. I have no idea. That's beyond your control. Control what you can control. I can put myself in the situation. I can measure the outcome. I can assess what I now can do differently and then go do it again. And the other thing that, in my work with men is competent men have fear. It's not that they don't have fear. It's that they have it, but they accept it. It's the acceptance of fear. Anytime I step out into from the known into the unknown in any capacity, the primal brain creates fear. The competent person accepts that. And through conquering that fear, probably more than anything else, Joe, the conquering of the fear is where the competence comes from.
Right. And for me, I want to say this is a multi-year cycle generally for me. The first time I ever saw that successory on the wall, a literal print from a store at the mall, success is in the journey, not the destination, something like that. Happiness is in the journey, not the destination. Like that really piqued my interest. Like, wow, that's insanely important. Like that's scripture to me. Like I need to focus on that. I probably didn't get there literally in my life embodying that for another 20 years. But I would come back to it as a marker of, don't forget this, don't forget this. I know you're busy achieving this and you want this, but don't forget to enjoy the journey. And there was a point, this is why I wanted to bring in Camus, where it was kind of the final rung of the ladder for me, probably because you start to get toward midlife and you realize you have fewer days ahead of you than you do behind you. And you do get a little bit more esoteric in trying to figure out and tie up all the loose ends of what you want your life to be. And that was a little bit of a not a little, it literally like changed my life as a worldview to look at Albert Camus and say, here were all of the existentialists from the Enlightenment. You get to, from Kierkegaard and all of those guys, Hume, Spinoza, and oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Nietzsche, we have killed God, and now we're all going to be nihilists. So that whole era was there. Everybody was afraid of what humanity was going to become if we unmoored ourselves from a singular fundamentalist agreed upon religion. And along came Camus and said, that's a false dichotomy. And in the opening line in The Myth of Sisyphus, he said, should I kill myself or should I get a cup of coffee? That's how I'm going to start my day. Should I kill myself or get a cup of coffee? In other words, if this life is worth living, regardless of what those worldviews may be pressuring you to think, it's okay just to live. It's okay just to get the cup of coffee and sit on the porch and watch the birds. That's okay. You don't have to be achieving things. Everything doesn't always have to be an answer for everything. You can just live. And I got to say, again, I started working on that intellectually 20 years prior. When I finally understood that, it was like the weight of the world came off of me because I no longer had to worry about whether I was adequate or not, whether I was doing the right thing. Because it seems noble to say, well, and this is how I live my life. I'm going to get to the end of my life and I'm going to have no regrets. I'm not going to say, man, I wish I would have, could have, should have. I'm going to do it all, but I was still attaching a sense of need to that. I was pressuring myself. If I didn't achieve those goals, I would be inadequate. And when I finally, somewhere in my mid 40s, realized I don't need to do a motherfucking thing. Like it just doesn't matter. My life is what it is. I mean, for great children, a spouse, a career, like all of these things, what else am I trying to do and why? And suddenly I started this journey that I'm still undergoing where now I'm learning to do things just because I want to, and that's okay. I have lost all sense of needing to feel adequate because what is it? Why is it even there? Why is it a comparison?
And the person that I have heard speak about that most brilliantly, in my opinion, Kobe Bryant.
Really?
That dude had that shit figured out like in high school. And he's like, do you think the fear of missing a shot? Like, who cares? Like, I just missed a shot. Like, so what? And like the fear of what people are gonna think, like his mindset at such an early age was so fascinating. Um, there were things that contributed to that in his childhood, but it was just like, God damn, man, that's like some genius stuff. And I will say this for all of this. I do think the number one obstacle that all of us have to face right now is distraction. And especially with now that we get everything in sound bites, like whether it's Reels or TikTok or whatever the fuck. It I mean, getting a gym membership does nothing. You got to go to the fucking gym. And like our inundation with self-help and mental health and learning about these kinds of things, that's fine. But there's a point of diminishing return to where this is now distracting you from the difficult thing that you have to do.
Oh yeah.
And it's and I think we're lying to people, Joe. I think, and I understand the capitalistic motivation into trying to sell a quick, easy solution. I mean, it ain't gonna fucking work, but there's a market for it. And it's like, I just, as a practitioner, I'm obligated to the Hippocratic Oath, above all, do no harm. And it's like, life's kind of fucking hard. I mean, it's just, the thing doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go most of the time. And if you are hinged to outcome, it's going to be a long, miserable life. It's going to be a long, miserable life.
Well, that is exactly if I could jump in. There are major studies, anthropological, epidemiological, cross-nation studies on contentment, especially contentment as opposed to happiness. And that is the exact summary of the study of the entire field of psychology when you're looking at happiness and contentment is that it is always divorced from outcome. The people, this is going to sound really weird to the Western way of thinking because we are so capitalistically outcome driven, but the definition of contentment, which I would argue is the opposite of inadequacy, if I'm constantly feeling inadequate, then I'm striving towards something I do not have. If I'm content, I'm not striving, I'm not struggling, I'm not in pain, I'm content. The definition is the distance between what you expect and what you actually have. So, what's the one thing we can do immediately to reduce anxiety? We can reduce expectations. Now, again, that's anathema to us in the West to expect less of yourself. But when you reduce that pressure, I mean, think of all of the pictures you see in these tribal villages. My kids have done medical and building missionary work overseas, and they're going to these dirt floor shanties. Everybody has nothing, and yet everybody's happy. There's no striving, there's no feelings of inadequacy. That would be such a foreign concept to them.
I remember this like vividly, and this was I just become I'd just gotten my temporary license, so I just started practicing. Didn't know shit about fuck. I mean, you talk about a paralyzing imposter complex, but I vividly remember this was when I was still practicing in Dallas, and I had a surgeon at a client as a client, which automatically triggered all of my insecurities. Like, oh my God, he's a surgeon. He must know everything. Um, but I remember, and I don't remember what triggered this conversation, but I remember him saying, the enemy of good is better. And I'm like, well, that's fucking wrong. And he's like, you know, when we were doing our surgical rotation and we were learning to suture, the the job of a suture is to connect tissue and stop bleeding. It's not to be the most beautiful suture that humanity has ever seen. It's to do those two functions. But as alpha competitive males in our surgical rotation, we would all want to make it look perfect. And when there was an imperfection, then we'd try to fix it. And then we'd start tearing that up and we'd have to put more sutures. And there is a point of diminishing return to better. Good enough is good enough. And in your life, in my life, I have areas of that I strive for excellence, that I want to be excellent, but it it's that application of also good enough is good enough. I did a I did a contract with this engineering firm and they were inefficient. We were trying to increase part of their efficiency. And we found that like I can't remember the exact amount of time that they spent sharpening all of their pencils. And like they'd have to take all 10 of them to the sharp like and it's like what like it just and it's just like everything had to be perfect. And I'm not saying that there's not instances where we don't strive for that, but like you're saying, when it's every event, every aspect of our life, everything is a statement about adequacy or inadequacy or those kinds of things. And you're exactly right. Third world countries have low expectation and much higher levels of contentment.
Yep.
And yet we just stay on that fucking treadmill and just keep sprinting at top speed, terrified of what the next challenge is going to be. And I don't know, where those things apply to each individual. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that, but I do know there's a diminishing return to everything. And when it's constant striving, it has a horrible point of diminishing return.
Yeah, well, one of the things we do, because you and your background in clinical psychology, mine in social science and social psychology, we're giving everybody prompts because I also want this to be very helpful and useful, not just two guys sitting here yapping at each other. Um, Last time I gave a prompt of kind of what you said this week of going out and risking something, a conversation, making a move to be socially active, proactive. This week is going to be a little bit more internal with me, and I would really love our audience to actually look for some information. I would suggest Albert Camus, but if you look up absurdism and what that means, his whole definition is it's just absurd to worry about all of these things. It's absurd to strive. It's absurd that you have these feelings of inadequacy because life is so random to begin with. And when you look at these categories of feelings of inadequacy, the internal, the external, and the demographic, you were born with these. You didn't pick these. And this is just your lot in life, and we have to find a way to just make sure our existence is satisfying to us at the end. And I want to tie it back to another Jeff Stuckey story, another one I do not know if you'll remember.
Okay.
The first time you ever came to our home, you had three small children. I had four small children. And as is the case in my parenting style, especially out here in the country, our kids had your kids running around the yard. We have 2.5 acres, woods, a lake. And I mean, they were probably throwing axes at each other, shooting flaming arrows. Something was happening. And initially, you were a little upset, like, hey, slow down. Hey, whoa, what's going on over there? You know? And then after a while, you looked at your spouse and you said, we got to start letting our kids have more fun. Like that entire evening, you saw your kids run around like savages, having the time of their lives. And I don't know if it translated into something longer term, but in that moment, you said, wow, we need to start letting our kids be kids. I
Yeah,
think
it was, I vividly remember that. And, I was raised in a very authoritarian household because I said so kind of environment, right? And it was always negating. Don't do that. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Quiet down. Just all of those kinds of things. So not replicating that was very difficult. Very difficult. And I remember my clinical supervisor, who was just absolutely wonderful. Um, he would always tell me, Jeff, freedom is reality, control is an illusion. Give up the illusion of control. Took me fucking 10 years to figure out what he was talking about. Like, what are you talking about with your Jedi mumbo jumbo?
it's
And
like
it was
Goodwill
like,
Hunting.
and that was one of the great benefits of seeing that because it it did continue to, I remember my oldest Taylor was about to graduate from the eighth grade and had zero behavioral marks from kindergarten to eighth grade. And I'm like, that you got to do something, man. Like, come on. Like, and she went and skipped class and got demerits or whatever they were and like came home proud as could be. And um
That's how we Klemczewskis influence the world. We
um but no, a lot of that had huge implications. And I had the challenges that I had that I gave all of my kids when they went away to school was in the first week you have to know everybody in your dorm.
Hmm.
Like you're the person that goes around and says, "Hi, I'm so and so. I'm from Evansville." Like, and I want to list the fucking names. And then the second thing was study abroad. Like, there's a big ass world out there. You got to get out there and go see it. Um, and got huge dividends on those as well. Um, in terms of a prompt, do something scary, and I don't fucking care what it is. Make yourself do it. And it can be small. It doesn't have to be, the getting on a bus and talking to yourself out loud. It find something that that terrifies you and start encroaching into that space of fear. And if it is just saying hi to someone on passing by on the sidewalk, if that's like, if that gives you inhibition, start there. It's just like working out, right? It's just, you got to start out as small as you have to start. And don't be discouraged by that. Find something that's going to challenge you, but not cause you harm. And, and develop a palate for fear. It's as children, we are when we do something that fails, our conclusion is I'm bad, right? That failed because I'm bad. I was bad. Whatever that was, and oftentimes reinforced by our parents. And that is that whenever outcome is still attached to identity, and I mean this in a clinical perspective, that's that's a very emotional, immature orientation. And beginning the process of emotional maturity, if I can do hard, scary things and I can learn from them, it's just like working out. It's the exact same principle. And I'll make one of this, when I work with people, contentment is our goal, not happiness. And the way that I define contentment is absence of emotional excitation. I'm just content. Happiness is emotional excitation. I mean, we've all been in circumstances where we're laughing so hard that we want to fucking stop laughing because it's just like, oh my God, that sort of thing. And it's like, happiness and contentment have nothing to do with each other. And contentment is a much deeper, much robust, much more meaningful emotional space than than any happiness that we can experience.
I agree. And I don't think before you said that I would have tied that inhibition component to a reduction of feelings of inadequacy. But now I see it. And I'll wrap us up with this one final story. Another little bit of a confessional. The whole reason I went into social psychology and social sciences is because I suck at it. I so badly want to be part of society and social circles and so forth and have those close, intimate relationships. And I'm just painfully shy, always have been. Gave those stories last week. This week, after having been hired, I have jumped in to help our regional food bank because they've hired an entire new development team, executive director, going through some big challenges. A couple connections led me to them. And I am now the resource development officer. My job is to be the face of this organization and to go out and shake hands and meet people. And yeah, you're laughing,
I
right? It's
am.
talking about
It's
pushing
like
yourself out of your comfort zone. This week, 2 days ago, my wife is in the volunteer center packing food packs for the weekend. These are our kids' weekend backpacks for kids who wouldn't have enough food to get through the weekend otherwise. And there are teams, corporations, companies who volunteer, and Tracy's back there with this group of guys, and I'm walking from the C-suite. So I'm on the carpet versus the concrete. I'm the guy who's going out meeting with bank presidents and donors and so forth. So I go out there and there are these people. These are my people, like the volunteers. This is what makes it work. And I go out there to see Tracy and say hi, and I walk back out. And I didn't even realize until I had left that I'll use your word myopic. I'm ignoring everybody around me because it's just how I operate. I'm that shy. And I walked down the hall and I said to myself, what the literal fuck are you doing? Like those people, you're the guy. And you did not even talk to a single person. So I marched my ass back in there and I shook hands, introduced myself, and asked those guys what they're doing, like what their connection, have they been here before? But why at 55 years old can I still not do that with just an initial reaction? Why is it still work? And that's kind of rhetorical. We don't have to start a whole nother, discussion about it, but
so glad you
that
asked,
is a
Jeremy.
struggle. And that's a hard thing. You gave people the prompt, go do something hard, go do something that risks breaking down some walls of inhibition. That's one that I fight constantly. And yet, when I do it, I realize that's the best thing in the world. That's why I crave it so much. And I need to keep putting myself out there, not feeling like something bad's going to happen. And because that is part of inadequacy, just do it. Just put yourself out there. That is where the best parts of life will be lived.
Well, and this, like one of the first things that I did when I got to Chicago was sign up for an improv class at Second City. And it was fucking terrifying. I mean, it's
That is
I mean,
unreal. That is unreal.
I mean, it just is like, and I had a sense. I mean, part of it was I I knew I find it that if I'm going to ask my clients to do difficult, vulnerable things, like I got to be fucking doing it. And it was 8 weeks for 3 hours, one night a week for 3 hours a night. And every week, no shit, I had to go in the bathroom, give myself a pep talk to get my ass there. Because improv is the opposite of control, right? I mean, when I go into session, I am like the master of my domain. And I'm like, I got to show up, and part of the one of the jokes that came to life in many of our skits that we would create was how much I sweat. Because when I get anxious, bruh, I just start sweating. And it just like, so that just kind of became one of the things that people would work into our skits. I just, I'm in the second week of my stand-up comedy class, and our graduation, September 29th, is we have a show and all of us perform. And people come to these shows. Like
I'm gonna write that down.
it's not like, and so now all of the sudden I I find myself starting to negotiate. Like, well, that's not really why you took the class. You don't, and it's like I have to work against those thoughts. It's like, no, I signed up for this process. I am accepting the fear of the process, and I'm not gonna, but I'm still fighting that. I mean, it's not like I'm like, no, this is going to be, I mean, all the self-doubt, all the like, and when that primal brain starts giving excuses, they're compelling excuses. And
You could definitely take any of them, and they are adequate. You
that's
can bow
valid.
out.
That's a perfect reason why I don't have to do that. And it's like, and it's shocking to me. I mean, somewhat disappointing that I still have to work that fucking hard on like, what the hell, dude? You're
So this
no,
is just therapy for both of us, this whole podcast.
you're no better than you were. And it's just like, and it's I apply so much of the therapeutic process to working out. It's you got to do it. And you get all of these simple cliches that most of us are tired of hearing of because they're fucking true, right? Is you get out of it what you put into it. That's just the goddamn truth. We don't need to fancy up that phrase because that's how it is. And it's like if somebody is offering you a solution different than that, you're being lied to. And don't be disappointed by the outcome. Hard is hard. That's how it is.
Okay, well, we have one more episode in this series focusing on the male crisis, and then I'm looking forward to branching out into other topics. But all you guys watching, listening, the whole impetus of this is because we think the human experience, as we just described in the last few minutes, is very complex, never ending, here to be explored. And I looked up these stats, Jeff. The universe being 13.8 billion years old, single cellular organisms to multicellular, on and on and on, all of the generations that it took for us to even be here. There is a 1 in 400 trillion chance that you are even alive. With all of history of our species, of the universe, coalescing down to the fact that we all here right now have survived, it's mind-boggling. I think it shows some gravity. It's a little bit of the other side of the coin to Camus absurdism. Yes, that's very random and absurd to even think about, but it also means you have a really unique opportunity. There was a 1 in 400 trillion chance for you to even be alive. Don't you want to enjoy it just a little bit more, explore it just a little bit more deeply? So, Jeff, I appreciate it. That's why we're here in Human, exploring that experience, and we will see all of you guys here next time.